Hi friends, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today I've got a Christmassy tutorial for you and a line art that you can download to draw along or color along with me. But first I want to let you know that Ohuhu is having some Black Friday deals, and they're the sponsor of today's video, which I thank them for so much. And they'd like to introduce a new product, and that is their bamboo marker stand. It's an attractive piece of studio furniture that will hold your Ohuhu markers and any other pens that you might have. So if you have the Ohuhu markers, it will hold 54 of the new wide Molokai markers, 126 of the round Honolulu style markers or the oval Kala markers, or 144 of the classic oval Ohuhu markers. So no matter what kind of markers you have, they will fit in this, even if they're not Ohuhu brands. So I love that stuff that you can assort, mix and match. You could put multiple types of markers in here at once. And I just wanted to show you what they look like in my studio with the Honolulu style Ohuhu markers in them. They're so pretty and well made, and it definitely would be a wonderful addition to anyone's studio. And now on to the tutorial. You can download a line artwork in the video description if you would like to color along with me today. I thought I would keep the drawing segment here in time-lapse just so you can see how I go about my process. I'm working in a Ohuhu marker pad, and I like this paper because it's smooth, it's great for marker, but it also has enough tooth that I can go in later and add colored pencil if I want to. I'm sketching in with a col erase pencil, which is just an erasable colored pencil in the color gray, because I'm starting off with kind of a gray pale, so I know that will kind of match and fade away as I work with my markers. I'm working with a couple reference photos from Unsplash, and I'm drawing a bow out of my imagination around the pail. Keep in mind that when you know how to draw, you can alter and augment any of the reference photos that you use so that you can make your design look just the way you want to. So it's definitely worthwhile learning how to draw if that interests you. But if it doesn't, use a line artwork. There's no shame in that. Once I've got my drawing down, I need to choose some colors, and I want some shades of cool gray so that I can start getting that galvanized pale texture in. And I like to start with my darks, and I know a lot of people like to start with their lights and work darker, but the reason I like to go in with my darks first is because it makes me brave, and I know once I get those darks in, then I will have my values established. So I've got the white of the paper, that will be my whitest white, and then I'm putting these shadows in that will be probably one of my darkest darks, aside from the fine liner that I add at the end. So by getting in there with those darks first, you're either going to do two things. You're either going to establish your values and get brave, or you're going to make a big mistake and you're going to fail fast. And hey, wouldn't you rather fail at the beginning of a drawing than at the end of one? I would, I could tell you that. So I go just in with those darks to begin with, and honestly, it usually works out fine. When I go light to dark, I find that I get timid and the picture becomes really precious, and then I get afraid to go in and put those darks in. So I'd rather just get them off right at the beginning. I'd rather just kind of pull that band-aid off and get those darks in right off the bat, and that works well for me. Now, the candy cane is white, but it's going to have some shadows, so I want to make sure I get those shadows in before I put the red down. Once I put those red stripes in, I'm going to have the chance of like streaking the red, so I want to get that shadow in first. The shadow's going to be everywhere, so I might as well get it in right off the bat. And I am using this marker here is one of the Kala markers, which has a slim broad tip, so it goes to a really fine point, but it also has the chisel edge. It's kind of a neat nib. You might like that, you might not. Everybody's different. That's why there's so many different options with markers. Ohuhu has I think 4 or 5 different versions now that you can check out, and it's a great time to check them out too, because they're on Black Friday special, and it's a percentage off depending on how much you spend, so you don't have to just buy this set or that set. Everything's included, which is really nice. And then once I got my reds in, I did go in with a fine tip red pen and just kind of crisping up some of the edges a little bit. So I like to use all the different iterations of Ohuhu markers. You'll see I've got the classics here. That's got a bullet tip and a chisel tip. I've got the Honolulu set A, which has the chisel and a brush tip. Honestly, I think probably the most versatile set to have, and it's the set I don't have because I already had the other ones, but there's a set called Honolulu set B. So I just want you to keep an eye out for that if you are thinking about buying markers. The Honolulu set B has a bullet tip on one end and a chisel tip on the other end, and that's really handy so that you have that bullet tip for fine details and you have the brush tip for blending and filling in large areas. And honestly, I think for most uses, that's going to be the most useful marker. That said, I thoroughly enjoy all the different sets I have from Ohuhu, and I think it's really fun to mix and match. Like this wide set, I love the new wide markers they came out with. Currently, there's only 24 colors available, but I'm hoping that they either come out with more or sell multi-packs of the just colorless ones that you can fill with your own ink, because they're a lot of fun, and I just love how easy it is to fill in an area with them and lay down a base that you can, blend into later, which we'll do. I find that the biggest way you're going to get blending is ink flow. So the nibs that give you the most flow are what's going to blend the best. So the fastest flowing marker would be your brush tip. That puts out a lot of marker, puts out a lot of ink, and it's a wide tip. Your bullet tip would be the least blending because it's the smallest nib and puts out the slowest amount of flow. And then in the middle would be the chisel tip. So if you have the markers with a bullet and chisel and you want to blend, you're going to want to use that chisel nib for blending. If you have the markers with the brush and the chisel nib, you're going to want to use that brush for blending, and you're going to want to use a chisel where you don't want to blend, where you want those fine crisp images. Like when I'm doing the little evergreen boughs, if I want those little tines, those little needles not to fuzz and blend, I'm going to want to use the chisel edge. If I'm doing the stripes on the candy cane and I've got the chisel or the brush, I might want to use a chisel because it's going to flow less ink and it's going to be less likely to feather and blend. So keep that in mind. It's more about your ink flow when it comes to blending versus the type of nib you're using. Now that said, I will say a brush nib is easier to use. They're more expensive, but they are easier. It's kind of like learning how to drive on a standard versus an automatic. And I've got viewer Dean Andrioli to thank for that analogy, because that is the most perfect way to describe learning alcohol markers. And I do have a class on alcohol markers. If you are interested, if you want to learn how to use alcohol markers from soup to nuts, it's called Alcohol Marker Workshop, and I will link to that below as well if you are curious about that class. Now, red is a hard color to blend, and I'm going to tell you that because I don't want you to see this and be like, oh, look, Lindsay blended that. Lindsay has this sped up like 6 times, so it didn't blend this fast or this easily. And you want a variety of reds. You want to have a scale of reds to be able to merge those colors together. I think the lightest color I'm using is light prawn, and the darkest one is probably like a cherry red or one of your darker reds. I don't have them all memorized by heart, so I can't tell you, but yeah, you're definitely going to be layering and blending in with several reds to get those to blend. Purple is another one that's hard to blend, and so is blue. Those really cool dark colors are tough to blend. So give yourself some time, give yourself some practice, and if all else fails, use some colored pencils to merge them together at the end. I do it all the time and it works great. So it doesn't matter how you get there as long as you like the results at the end. So cut yourself some slack, give yourself some grace, and enjoy the creative process. I love to go in here with these darker burgundies and darker reds at the end and like add those deeper, darker details. There's a lot of layers here, especially when you're trying to blend something like a red. So keep that in mind when you're working. There you can see that big wide Molokai marker again. Man, I just love these. I hope they come out with more of them. They are so fun. I think the thing I like about the wide markers, and if you have a hard time loosening up, you feel too tight with your work, or everything is too precious, get yourself a pack of those wide markers. I like the Halcyon Oasis set. Is my favorite because I think even after you've like kind of practiced and loosened up with them, you're going to use those more because those colors are what you would put in landscapes to fill large areas, but they're all great sets. And I think they're just really wonderful for loosening up. Now there's some different sheens and textures here in this still life. So the Jingle Bell here is very shiny, so I'm going to go for a very shiny look here. The blue Christmas ball there, the teal one, is a little more matte, so I'm going for a matte finish. So when I was coloring in that teal ball, I was kind of stippling or dabbing the ink in with my brush tip marker just to give it that kind of matte effect. You can see I'm stippling here with this dark teal. That stippling just basically means you're kind of making little dots. You're tapping. You're making little points, or pointillism is another thing to call it there. And that's going to help me get that matte frosted type of finish to that Christmas ball. And then the galvanized pail is somewhere in the middle. We've got some shininess, but there's also this texture to it. And I use the chisel edge a lot for that, and just kind of put little sharp marks with the chisel edge to give me that galvanized texture. We have the shiny candy candy cane, and we'll be bringing out that shine with a white paint pen at the end. So think of what you have for materials and try to get those textures. The bark texture is done really easily with the chisel end of the marker. I know there are a lot of people that will get the brush markers and they'll never touch the chisel end, but you are missing out on a very valuable resource, a very powerful tool in your arsenal. So get to know those ends. Maybe you have a set of markers from back in the day that's the bullet and the chisel tip, and then you bought the brush markers and then you never looked back. Get those markers out, my friend. Use those nibs. Use that bullet nib. Use that chisel nib. The bullet nib is great for sharp details that don't feather out because it doesn't put out as much ink. Just be aware of that and use all of those varieties of nibs that you have. Now it's time to do some fine lining. I like to do it at the end, like I mentioned before. A lot of people like to do it first. It doesn't matter. It's whatever you like. These Ohuhu fine liners will be fine if you want to draw with them first and then add your ink on top. They also work well with watercolors, or you can do them at the end like I'm doing it. But just make sure if you're going to do these before you add your alcohol markers that the ink is fully dry. Now, I left that real time so you could see how slow I fine line, okay? Now we're going to speed it up so we're not here for 3 years. But yeah, go slow and just be accurate. And also, I try to move my whole arm when I'm lining so I get a nice smooth edge. And I also turn my sketchbook so that I'm never pulling my line in an awkward position, because when you're pushing your line away from you or you're pulling it in a weird, awkward position, that's when you get those hiccups on your line and you don't have a nice smooth edge. So you want to make sure that you're working in an ergonomic, comfortable way. That means you want to make sure that your seat is at the right height, your table is at the right height. You're not getting like a pain between your shoulder blades. If you start get that pain between your shoulder blades, your chair isn't at the right height. So make sure you're comfortable, because marker art takes a while. This drawing took me 1 hour and 20 minutes. So just kind of keep that in mind so that you are not cramping up or making yourself uncomfortable, because, you know, that's not fun. We want art to be fun and enjoyable, and it's going to be fun if you're comfortable. And yeah, and a lot of times here I'm putting in details that I never even did with the markers, like adding detail to the little topper, the little hanger, adding in the little shadows in the bell, adding in little details on the tines and in the pine cones and all of that. Just take your time, and if you didn't have a really crisp edge or really know where you were going when you were coloring it in with a marker, you can make up with that with a fine liner. Now, what I would do with the line artwork that I'm sharing in the video description, I would print that out and I would transfer it onto your marker paper using very light lines, using like light box and a very light colored pencil, something so that it's not too bold. Then I would color it. Then I would do the fine lining like this. Getting that practice in your fine lining is really nice. Now, it is, if you do have an inkjet printer, you could just print it on your marker paper and color it and call it a day. That's fine too. But I just want you to know you have options with line artwork. You have options when you're following a tutorial. You really should make it your own. And then, hey, I think this would make a really cute Christmas card. So if you want to take that artwork and then go to have it printed, like Vistaprint or whatever you like to use, you could totally do that. I don't mind. I mean, I'm using reference photos from Unsplash, which people generously shared with me. So, you know, I want to generously share this with you and, you know, have fun with it. I think it would make a really, really cute Christmas card. Here I'm using an Ohuhu white gel pen. They have a pack that's got several white, gold, and silver, which is nice this time of year because you can use like the silver to address your envelopes if you use like a red or a dark colored envelope. And then you've got the gold and the silver to add embellishments to your artwork or to your greeting cards or whatever you want to do. And then you've got many of the whites that are just awesome year round. I'm also using a white acrylic paint pen, which is a little bit more thick and opaque, and that's great for those really bold white highlights that I want to put in there. But my secret weapon is to use colored pencils and to add details. Like I'm adding the shininess to the ribbon. It's really easy to overdo it though. I will warn you, I do tend to overdo like my highlights and stuff. So, you know, you might want to do a little less. That's up to you. But it's a great way to add the extra dimension onto your work and to blend colors together that maybe didn't blend as well as you liked when you were doing the markers. Like I mentioned, some colors are very difficult to blend. Reds, blues, purples, those are the the real doozies when it comes to blending. And you can really merge those colors together with some colored pencil. And if you don't like the sheen of the colored pencil, you can go in with your colorless blender marker or any of the other markers you've already used, your lighter tones, and you can dissolve it and blend it in with your marker, which is really nice. Just scribble your marker off on a scrap of paper before you cap it and store it, just to make sure there's no wax left in the nib. But that's a great way to get the most out of your markers and your colored pencils. And they don't have to be expensive colored pencils. They can be whatever you have, whatever's in your stash. Borrow them from your kids if you need to. They're going to work fine. And yeah, I really like how this came out. It was a lot of fun to design this and to play with these different mediums and combine these different reference photos and just make something that was honestly fun to work with, and it just put me in the holiday spirit. And I know we're not quite yet to Thanksgiving, but man, I'm telling you, it comes quick. Once you hit November, it feels like Christmas is right around the corner and things get hectic. So if you can take, an hour or two out of your week and make some art and just enjoy creating, I think it can really alleviate a lot of stress this time of year. Here I'm mixing different brands. I like to keep my wax-based colored pencils right close at hand. I have brands mixed up together. The reason I like them is because they are a little bit more opaque than oil-based pencils, so they show up a little bit more on top of colored paper and on top of marker. So I just tend to use it to kind of zhuzh up and sharpen up my watercolors and markers, and it works really well for that. Plus, I have a nice variety of colors, so if I do need to touch up an area or fix a mistake, I can get the color that I need to. So this right here is sped up about 4 times just to kind of give you a little bit of perspective. So it's a little bit slower than the other parts, but I wanted you to see exactly how I do these finishing details so that you can do that too, if that's something that you're interested in. It can be really hard to get a nice shadow and a smooth shadow when you're trying to blend out those grays. So using a gray color pencil works great. This is a cool gray, I think 70% that I'm using here. And it works really well because I used cool grays on the pale and in the shadow. So they kind of match the undertones. That's one thing you do want to consider when you're doing shadows. Make sure your grays are the same undertone, either blue gray, cool gray, warm gray, or neutral gray. And usually that will be noted on your pencils and your markers, so you can make sure you have the right thing. And at this point, I'm just adding little bits of highlight and colors just for fun. I really enjoyed this stage of the process, so I probably overdo it a bit, but I think it's a lot of fun. You can brighten up any highlights with straight white, and just do as much or as little as you like. And here you can see the finished artwork. I'm really proud of how it came out, and it was so much fun to work on. Now, I wanted to show you that marker storage that I showed you at the beginning of the video. I wanted to show you how many markers we could fit in here, and I also think it's really satisfying to watch somebody organize something by color. I don't know, is it just me? Let me know in the comments below if you like to see people arrange things by color. But one thing I did realize with this rack here, that I could store 126 of the Honolulu markers. And of course, depending on what type of marker you have, you're going to get a different variety. But if you have a bunch of round markers at home already, that's going to give you a good idea as to how many of these cases you would need if you wanted to store them all this way. If you're leaving this on a shelf, there's 7 markers per slot. So when you take one out, they might roll together, but you can keep them pretty well organized and arranged in their color, by their color undertones, which is how I like to arrange them. With the wide markers, you can fit 3 per section, which would give you space for 54 if you have these, or maybe some wide markers from Copic back before they discontinued them. But you could always mix and match them. So you could put your Honolulus, your Kala, your Oahus, your Molokai. You could mix and match them depending on what you have or what you like to have close to hand. Now with the ovals, because they're skinnier and you can put them on their side, these are the classic Oahus, you can actually put 144 markers in here. Now we did try it with Copics, and I was able to get 162 Copics in here of the sketch ones. So they're just slightly smaller, so you get that extra marker, and isn't that funny? But you can kind of ballpark it and figure out with the markers you have what you would need for capacity. And again, isn't it fun to look at things being sorted in rainbow order? I think it's delightful. Now, when I recommend people sorting their markers, and I go over this in the alcohol marker workshop, I like to look at undertones. So like your blues, some blues will have a green undertone or a teal undertone. Some will have a purple undertone. Some will be more neutral. Some will have a gray undertone. All of your colors are like that. They're going to have certain undertones. And if you could keep them together in one of the sections by their undertones, it's going to make blending so much easier. So here are the Kala markers. They are actually a little bit bigger than the classic Ohuhus, so you only can get 126 of those in this case, or 7 markers across. And just one more reminder, Ohuhu is having their Black Friday sale. You can save between 10 and 25% on your order depending on how much you buy. So I would recommend kind of figuring out what you need to get, or if you're buying presents for people and order all at once, you can get the biggest discount. And I will have a link in the video description to take you to ohuhu.com so you can check it out for yourself. And I want to thank Ohuhu for sponsoring this video. I do appreciate their support. They've been a very kind partner over the years, and I hope you've enjoyed this video today. Thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up before you go. Until next time, happy crafting. Bye.